Okay, when it comes to resumes, interviews with clients or potential employers, here's a little bit of the things that I do. First thing is I will tend to modify my background. Now, with this, I can use AI for a lot of different options. Typically, I will do something based on my lighting that has a little bit of green and is dark. And the reason for that is because then if you got any of this sort of aliasing happening, it, doesn't bleed through quite the same. And I'll kind of take an image that I already have or that I like, and then I'll just modify it so that I can go ahead and throw their logo. And if their logo has a certain element, then make sure to include that element. Like they had a wolf as part of their logo, so I covered it up with a block, but that's just in the background. It's tweaked a little bit. And there's that going on, right? You can also try different set pieces. So here's what I'm thinking. That's worth covering. Same situation, different room, right? And then you have their logo in the middle. But it's just kind of a nice little personal touch I like to do when I'm with somebody for a one-on-one interview, on-one meet. So not only that, but let's talk about the resume. So at this point, you probably heard about lots of people submitting multiple resumes, and there's a lot of ways that people are doing it using code. So here's just something that I think is an easy process that you guys can go follow with, and ultimately can probably automate even more of it. So first things first, we're going to use AI for the custom resume submission. The way to do that is I would actually recommend going to your LinkedIn. The reality in my mind is that your LinkedIn is basically I don't know why we still have these separate resumes, but the reality is that your LinkedIn has the best setup for it. So with that, essentially you go into your LinkedIn, you would copy all of the stuff. And once that has happened, you're going to bring that into ChatGPT. In ChatGPT, you're going to go ahead and paste all of that. And then you're going to ask ChatGPT to take all these bullet points and turn it into JSON. Okay. The reason we want to put it in a JSON format is because we're going to give all of this stuff structure. Depending on how you're applying or some of the forms you might need to fill out that have to manually be inserted. If it's JSON formatted, some of these readers can read that, and then they can pick the start and end dates. They can grab the bullet points that are relevant, etc. But it just you can't have the JSON format as a .json. So what you want to do is actually bring that in and save it as a Word doc. Okay. So here, basically, for an idea, is I have a Word doc, right? And so I just have stuff like, the role, the company, employment type, start date, end date, duration, location, responsibilities, and then go ahead and put those bullet points, whatever they are. And it's going to be exactly as it is at inside of LinkedIn. All we're doing is just bringing the data over, right? We're trying to sanitize the data, making it easy to utilize later in ChatGPT. So, speaking of ChatGPT, after ChatGPT has reformatted all of that, then what we're going to do next is we're going to actually build our own GPT. Now, for me, what I did is I built a little resume enhancer, and I'm going to go through it with you in a little more simple way of going through it. Now, just give it a little bit of a description. Let's go through the actual steps, right? So step number 1, prompt me for an input in the form of a string, right? The way ChatGPT works and the way these GPTs work is they understand this idea of tokens. If you're a coder, then you're already understanding the idea of variables and things that have, sort of this meaning. So I'm giving it as simple instructions as I can. Prompt me for an input in the form of a string, right? So later I can refer to that thing and go ahead and give it a variable name. So in the future, when I'm referring to it, I can reference it, right? I want you to prompt me for that input in the form of a JSON, right? And then I can go ahead and drop in the JSON. I want to go through a very sequential step of a back and forth process. If I want to refer to it in the future during my back and forth, then I have a way of referencing it. And the reason why I do these little exclamation marks and this is because it is sort of isolating that idea, encapsulating it inside of what is basically going to be a variable, right? Because there is no real variable, right? If none is provided, then I want to go ahead and use, and then I give it a sort of basic template that follows the role, company, employment type, duration, location, responsibilities, yada, 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 right? Step 3, build a new JSON file from the extracted data from string input, which we've established what I'm referring to when I say string input, and then refer to this in the future as a variable named this resume underscore. Right, good. Now it should prompt me again for additional data input to include in the resume. Now the reason I did it this way is because it allowed the flexibility of maybe I don't actually want to include all of my resume information, maybe I only want to include some of it. What we can also do is use that Word doc that is saved with the master JSON file formatting that we have set up, and we can save that in the GPT for reference as far as having a document that's referenceable and it understands a little bit more about the knowledge set basing things off of. So that's the resume JSON. Now I will provide a JSON file, refer to this in the future as a variable named LinkedIn JSON. And I want to keep this very specific so that it understands that, hey, this JSON we're referring to, this is the LinkedIn JSON. It might be a little bit different than what I'm dropping in custom-wise. I do have this sort of flexibility because depending on what I'm applying to or what I want to present, I might want to highlight one to train it more on one thing as opposed to another. It might be more about AI. It might be more about development. It may be more about design. Whatever the case is, I can kind of make those modifications. I want to expand the object because obviously at this point we're building out these objects in JSON. And so I'm going to refer to that, expand the object inside of here to include the additional data extracted in from LinkedIn. Now, the important thing I want to point out here is the reason why I'm doing all these extra steps is because when you do an application, they are usually going to provide you a lot of information with certain keywords they're looking for, certain buzzwords. So with that, essentially, we want to kind of prepare and sanitize all the data so that when that time does come, essentially, I want you to take this and I want you to take this and I want you to see if there's any overlapping data, right? Any overlapping keywords or positions, similar titles. And then I want you to use their choice words and insert them accordingly, replace, swap things out. And then what we'll go ahead and do is we'll re-verify. Also look for the ideal things they're looking for in candidates. And if it does match up, we'll of course have myself as a human to verify, check, boom, send it out. It's been a custom modified resume. Request an input string from me for a job posting. Refer to this as the future as a variable named input application underscore string. Right. Once again, I'm keeping this input. And so what I'm doing is I am quite literally, right, going to take the job application I see here about this job. All right. Go ahead and zoom in a little bit. About this job, we'll go ahead and copy pretty much everything that seems relevant. Now, sometimes there'll be extra things in here that really are not necessary. And we don't want to confuse with additional data that really isn't necessary. If you're ready to contribute to community, yada, yada, yada. I think there's a lot of filler words that always happen, but we can just take whatever it is, we can copy it, and then we would go ahead and drop it in when it prompts us for that request. Let's create a JSON file from the extracted data, right? So next, we want it to actually build out a new JSON file from that. So it's going to take this, right? Build a new JSON, build a new object, and that's going to have some of those keywords and things that it's looking for, right? Something that we can refer to, right? And then we can compare these two objects. Refer to this in the future as a variable named application. Right, so now we have two pieces of JSON data that we're going to compare. Step 6, take the resume JSON and point out all potential opportunities to cross-reference it with application JSON, right? So we've got one JSON file and another JSON file that we've basically sanitized both versions. We've sanitized both versions of data, and now we're basically looking for where do they overlap? Where is there potential opportunities? And then I wanted to bring back to me any of those talking points. Now, this is also helpful because on the one-on-one interview, or while I'm speaking with a client or potential applicant or company I'm applying to, whatever, this gives me an opportunity to really see the whole point of any interview or any meeting is to see where that overlap takes place, to be very specific about what they're looking for. And what about my history or my particular experience will perfectly line up with that. This also can help us preparing for an interview or preparing the resume, applying the role of. All right, cool. Make a new copy and name it resume JSON, and then company name. This is important because what this will help me do is basically go ahead and give me a little bit of the formatting of what I need so that I can have the company name and the job title. Because at some point you start saving these things and then you're forgetting, okay, what was this for? What was this for? And if it's similar enough, I might be able to reuse that as a starting point, as beginning basis for future work or a future starter set for something. Updated the name of the file to, and then it's just naming conventions so that I can have a reference. What's the company name and the job title on the application? Great, cool, good. So, anyways, so those are the specific instructions, right, that I've given it to a T, and it'll kind of extract out what it thinks would be good starters. I never really use the starters. That's why I'm very clear and specific about saying step 1, step 2, step 3. And I specifically tell it to prompt me, right? So that it has this back and forth expectation. And if there is any issue along the way, I can say, repeat step 4 using this, repeat step 5 doing this, do that. I am aware of the different steps in the process. As far as a knowledge base, you can go ahead and drop in that resume -master JSON file, right? You can go ahead and drop it in here. The reason why you might want to have it as a Word file is because when you are auto-populating a form on one of those automatic application pieces, and it's like, let us fill it in for you, but it never populates the way you want it to because it doesn't. You can go ahead and drop in this resume-master, but have it as a Word. It still doesn't work the best, but it can be very effective. And then you can just, get any more specific, code interpreter, web browsing, and that is it. So once you have all of that, you'll be able to go ahead and start your process. I added a few extra things like a Rodney Dangerfield-esque resume, just so it has a little bit more of a personality when it's engaging with me and talking. So let's see if we covered everything. Copy and paste, insert the JSON, copy and paste about the company, copy and paste the requirements, ask for resume with dates and cover letter. Yep, perfect. So that is a way of putting all this together, and then you can reuse this for different applications. I know people are probably think of a few ways you can probably automate this even more and faster, but this is one way that essentially once the GPT is built and set up, you can just copy and paste and just drop in the relevant information. And of course, you as a human need to go in, verify, and make the modifications where it's appropriate so that it does match your actual experience, your actual background, etc. if there's anything correct. This can save you some significant time, especially if you're trying to custom tailor these resumes or interview questions, etc. And you're trying to tailor it specifically towards a company. If this is a matter of this is just really the way things are headed. If you're not utilizing AI in your workflow, in your company's general process, whatever that is, you're missing out on some significant opportunities and wasting significant time. There's no way I'm going to say that it is possible to really compete with a lot of the ways that some companies are just being bombarded with constant resumes. So this is a way of customizing it specifically towards them. And not only that, but you can also modify this so that based on the individual who, let's say you find their LinkedIn, then based on that LinkedIn, you can know a little bit more about them, and based on their history and what they have in their LinkedIn information, you will be able to be prepared with some of the things that they might be looking for as their role during the interview process. These are just ways of simulating essentially what is just the future of AI integration into the common workplace. So I hope this has been interesting to you. I hope it's been helpful. Thank you guys for watching and have a nice day.